I'm Evan Pratt. I would like to welcome everyone to another meeting of the Dam Safety Task Force. Today we are planning to get through the remainder of our recommendations. There are quite a few. So for purposes of public comment today, just to kick us off, and I will mention this again as people chime in and we get a little deeper into our agenda. For purposes of public comment, if anyone does have a comment to make, please get into the chat box and someone will be monitoring that and let you know. And we will be able to advise as we get towards the end of the meeting what that would look like today. But just so folks who are tuning in are aware, there will be a dedicated session for public comment coming up here at the end of the month. Correct if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, but I believe that's January 27th in the morning.
That's right, 9 a.m. on the 27th.
Okay, sounds good. With that, I will turn it over to our secretary to call the roll, and then I'll finish the introductory remarks. I just wanted to make sure we had that public comment item out there initially, and again, I'll repeat it. John, go ahead.
So good morning, everyone. I'll go down the list. Director Ajigba.
This is Brad Weifrick from Michigan DOT, standing in for Director Ajigba.
Thank you, Brad. Mindy Bacon.
Here.
John Broshek's here. Brian Burrows.
Here, from DeWitt, Michigan.
Excellent. Director Clark.
Here from Howell, Michigan.
Director Eichinger.
Present from Isabella County, Michigan.
Brett Fessel.
Present from Sutton's Bay, Michigan, Leelanau County.
We had previously identified that Dr. Holgren will join us at about 10:30. Dr. Infante.
Here from Lansing, Michigan.
Welcome. Douglas Jester.
Present from East Lansing.
Jim Kochever.
I'm here in Ishpeming, Michigan.
Paul Maloka.
Here from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Tanya Pazlewski.
Here from East Lansing.
Evan Pratt had already identified himself. Bill Rustum.
Here from Alden Township, Ingham County, Michigan.
Commissioner Scripps.
Here from Northport, Leelanau County, Michigan.
I'll mention Dr. Vatan, but we believe that he is preoccupied right now.
Well, actually, I'm on the phone right now, but I'm in my office in about 10 minutes.
Great. Welcome, Stan. Thank you.
Thanks.
Abby Watkins.
Present from White Cloud, Michigan.
And then Glenn Wizorek.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Excellent. That should be everyone, Evan.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now we've got a pretty brief agenda, as I mentioned today. What we're going to do is hopefully go through, as we did the December meeting, kind of clumps of recommendations. So 4 or 5 or 6 at a time, what fits on the screen. As the task force members know, we've had these for the better part of a month and had an opportunity for final comments. So the way we'll proceed through those today is to just determine, is there any recommendation someone really can't live with since we've had the opportunity to tighten up the language. But before we dive in, I would like to just make sure we formally propose to accept our agenda, if anyone would like to move that.
This is Douglas Jester. I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye?
Aye.
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 Great, thank you. And then we've got the minutes from our meeting of December 17th. If someone could please move those.
So moved.
So moved. Support.
Did you get that, Elizabeth? All right. The minutes have been moved and supported. Does anybody have any comments? I know sometimes there's a need to tighten up what you said or this or that. Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye or just raise your hand. Aye.
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 Okay, great. Now we were to the point for any updates from the director. So Director Clark, if you've got any comments or preambles or instructions for us or updates, let us know.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Evan. And again, I'm going to be a broken record on how much we really do appreciate the time and energy that's been put into this deliberative process by task force members, as well as the participation that we're seeing from the public. So certainly looking forward to that session that Evan described a little bit later in January. What we're hoping to have in front of the public for feedback is the work of this task force. So I don't want to spend too much time talking because I know that there's a lot in front of us. And so we'd love to move us back into those recommendations. I think we did some really good work when we came together just a few weeks ago, and looking forward to today as well. So thanks, Evan. I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Well, with that, I think we are ready to proceed and just dive right into things. If Elizabeth or Aaron, you'd like to go ahead and put up our first set of recommendations on the screen. And as we're doing that, I'll just remind the members of the public that because we've got a dedicated session for public comment coming up on January 27th, we're looking for people to specifically get into the chat box here and let folks know if they do have any comments that they really feel like they need to make today. Otherwise, there will be a full opportunity to make comments on the 27th, and we will, as task force members, be able to see kind of the themes of those comments and what those comments are prior to our next meeting, which is scheduled for February 3rd. All right. So we have in front of us a set of recommendations here from our permitting and design review group. So there are several from 2029A all the way down to 2020 10C. So what I'll do again is just take a couple of minutes and ask if there are any task force members who would like to pull any of those items for further discussion before we move along, or if we're in good shape, there's no need to make any comments. So any
Evan?
Yes.
Excuse me, can I just interject here for a moment just to kind of set the stage a little bit?
Oh, go ahead.
In addition to what you have said. So we have about 90 minutes on the agenda for this item, and fingers crossed, the task force will be able to get through all of them. We have organized these recommendations in a way that we're hoping to make some good progress in the first part of it, because I would predict that you'll want to spend a little more time on what we have toward the end. So in terms of a cadence, just keep in mind that there's a number of tabled items from the previous meeting that are at the end. So I just wanted to highlight that. And also just reiterate what Evan had shared previously to the task force, which is we're not going to be doing individual yes votes on all of these recommendations today. So we are rather looking to find out if there are any objections. And again, if there are, that specific replacement wording would need to be presented today. We can then have some limited timed discussion about that if needed. And then as the chair, Evan will lead in selecting what that appropriate action is, whether to determine if that proposed change is acceptable or whether this item needs to be set aside. So if there are any recommendations that require more discussion than we have available for today's meeting, then I guess you should recognize that those might be set aside. They may not make it into the final report. So, and then if there aren't any objections, if recommendations are acceptable, then Aaron will present the next set of draft recommendations. So thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Great. Aaron, can you scooch that up just a bit so we can see the rest of the text for 10C? Just I don't think we necessarily need to see the header words. There we go. That's 6 of our recommendations that we have not formally adopted. So going once, any concerns on this list from the task force? All right, seeing none, Aaron, if you'd like to move us forward to the next grouping. All right, so now we've got 11A through 12D. I think we can all see the header there. Any concerns that any of the task force members have? Going once. All right, seeing none, I guess I need to thank you all for your hard work in reading these ahead of time and gaining a comfort level. Aaron, let's move to the next grouping. It looks like you practiced this a little bit. These seem to be fitting rather nicely. Okay, just 2 recommendations, but as you see, the first one provides quite a bit of detail of an important element, just monitoring how the structure is performing over the long term. Again, any concerns with these from the task force members? Going once. All right, thank you very much. We'll move forward to the next grouping. This is starting out like the middle part of that Michigan game last night. We're on a good run here. Thank you. So program management, funding, budgeting. We've just got a couple of 3 items here. The third one being a new recommendation, doesn't have a header number like some of the other ones did. Any comments or concerns with these from task force members? Going once. All right, we'll move next to the next grouping. So I'll just provide a little bit of context with this. There were a number of recommendations that came before the program management group, management, funding, and budgeting. It was kind of a catch-all, and there were a number of items that the group really felt like had either an administrative component to them or otherwise were, I'll say, non-technical. You know, the committee felt that we did not have a great deal of expertise in the internal operations. So as you can see, for example, from these, they look pretty much like they did in the recommendations from the Association of Dam Safety Officials, just bringing out that obviously there's a lot of bullets in what they recommended to what the dam safety program manager position needed to include. But the point being that our group did not fly spec quite a few of these because they had more of an internal component to them. Any comments or concerns from the group?
The only thing I'll raise, Evan, is the very last one. I mean, we have a recommendation elsewhere for a revolving loan program or rehabilitation, right?
We do. I believe that the idea of having this bullet within the dam safety manager position description would mean, let's say something is set up for a revolving loan program initially, but 7 years from now, there is a need for that to be revised, reviewed, adjusted, a new recommendation, and this squarely puts it on the shoulders of that manager to be responsible for whatever 2.0 might look like. At least the way in my reading anyway.
I just don't. What I don't want to happen is, okay, for the legislature to take a look at this and go, oh well, we're going to wait for the recommendation from the new manager. That and maybe we're okay. Maybe we're okay.
No, that's a good point. Would you like to set this aside so we can identify any fine tuning as we get towards the end of the meeting? I think our idea was if there are any set asides, we might pull them and come back to them later, but I'm happy to resolve it now.
Mr. Chair, can I just offer, the other approach might be, put some language around the bullet where it's developing the structure of the program, right? Because I can see where there's statute and the dollars are approved. But to your point, the manager would be responsible for the execution of the program. But I do appreciate Bill's point. We wouldn't want to wait for the manager to recommend the structure of the program. I think the manager would be executing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the difference.
That makes sense. So we're saying thank you, Aaron.
If people feel comfortable with that, or we can set it aside too.
Yeah,
I'm very comfortable with that.
Yep. And you said it more eloquently than I did. I was really thinking along those lines more so than will someone need to change the dollar amount in the future, although that may well be the case. I feel it's really important with especially a new program to stop and take a look back after 3 to 5 years to do any fine tuning you need to. So I love having this in here. Any comments from the rest of the task force that this would not be acceptable to add the executing in there?
Excuse me, Chair, I believe that one of the dam safety program staff members may have raised their hand. Dan Devon.
Great. Certainly happy to have Eagle input as well, since they have to deal with this.
Sorry, I meant to hit the chat button, actually, but what I was going to suggest would be, instead of developing a recommendation, it would be annual reevaluation and executing, as you had included.
So just to wordsmith, I would say regular reevaluation, not annual, just because you never know.
Correct. Yeah.
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 But yeah, I like it, regular reevaluation.
And I do just want to reiterate that we are trying to make sure that there is language brought to the meeting today if there's going to be an edit on the recommendations.
Yep. Okay, any other concerns or comments relative to this group of recommendations? All right, going once. All right, we will move on from these to the next grouping. Thank you. Thanks for the input, though. I think that was a good point to make, Bill. Okay, so we're still in the funding and budgeting program type of areas. And I will mention to folks, especially people who've been with us all along, these items were grouped in a certain way to help us break into manageable work groups and have somewhat related items to deal with. However, in the final report, it's most likely that we will not see those same groupings. I think the feeling is they may not translate well to our final recommendations. And in fact, some of the recommendations may be put in a little bit different order just based on some of the new items folks have brought up. So I don't want anybody to be concerned if they were used to seeing certain items next to each other. It won't be because something has vanished mysteriously. It's just there may be some restructuring in the order. I don't, in my own mind, have a particular way that needs to be done, but I am aware that that may be necessary just for the flow of the overall written report. With that, now in front of us are items 2020-03B through 05B, so a little bit of a bigger chunk, but most of these are pretty digestible. I'll give it just an extra minute for everyone to make sure if there was anything they had a concern about with any of these, they have a chance to skim through here.
And if I could add, this page and then the next two batches are all part of recommendations to be addressed by Eagle, and they all have had unanimous support and recommendation from the subgroup that met on these.
Yep. Good point. All right, going once. Seeing no further concerns, we'll move on to the next grouping. Thank you very much. All right, so we've got 2026A through 7J. Again, as Elizabeth mentioned, a lot of internal functional items, important, but most of these do not require any sort of legislative action. They're generally at the discretion of the department. So any concerns going once? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our next grouping. Okay, so 2028A through 16C, plus a pair of other supplemental bullets, newer recommendations beyond what ASDSO included in theirs. Any concerns or objections to this last group of kind of internal recommendations? Going once. Okay, seeing none, we're ready for the next grouping. So sounds like everybody heard what you said, Elizabeth.
And I do want to note for these, Evan, so they were just part of the legislation authority. These were actually approved, if you recall at the last meeting. So I'm letting people know we're not skipping over this. These were approved, but the second part of the legislation authority, which was, newer and as in not ASDSO recommended. So just so everyone knows, that's still part of legislation authority, but this is where we're starting today.
Yep. Yes, we did not intend today to go over and re-review the comments that we had already approved, but of course it was a little difficult to have a complete document to share with everyone of all the recommendations without including what we'd given the thumbs up. So thank you. So as you can see here, many of these are recommendations that are more Michigan specific. These were things the group felt like in their understanding, experience, or based on the input that we received from the public, that there were some areas of work that were not recommended by the Association of Dam Safety Officials. Again, these have been vetted by the Legislation and Authority Group, and I think a few other people have crossed over a little bit on some of these. But any comments or concerns, or I know we don't have numbers on these, so if there is an item you're concerned about, maybe just identify whether it's the third or fourth bullet, independent of the coloring. Going once?
Wait, yeah. Hang on a sec.
Yep.
Sorry. I had two systems going at the same time. I apologize. So my question, I guess it's concern, is the first one is that refine current Michigan statute definition of high hazard dam to include significant natural resource damage. That one, is this new?
This is, we had talked about it earlier. This is Bill Russell. We had talked about it. The same language.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, Tim.
The same language, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's natural resource damage is included in both the definition of high hazard and what's the second category?
Significant hazard?
Significant. It's exactly the same language. So this is just to say, I think this is just to add the word significant under high hazard to separate it from, separate those two categories because they're exactly the same language. That's my recollection.
Yeah, I believe this bullet, though, is one that certainly was in the information that was sent out earlier, but Elizabeth can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it would have been in the December package too, but I can appreciate where it might not have jumped out.
That's correct.
Okay, so I have to apologize, Stan Viton here. I had two systems going at the same time, so I had to shut one off. The question again, you are separate. This is only referring to significant or to high hazard dams, not to significant or low.
That is how it reads, and that was Bill's explanation. Yes, that's
okay,
my right. I was in that work group too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I'm okay.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other concerns? I know we're moving along pretty good here. If not, going twice. Okay, I think we can move on to the next grouping. And again, these are recommendations that are supplemental to what the Association of Dam Safety Officials brought to us. So as you can see, they are not numbered, but I know the task force is very familiar. We spent a lot of time talking about what should we do about FERC. And I will say that a number of these items, although I think the concepts were there in bullet form in our December package, these have had quite a bit of back and forth and massaging between either the committees, the officers, and or Eagle, because as you can appreciate, whether it's with the FERC or the dam definition further towards the bottom, these are quite a needle to thread. So there has been quite a bit of time and energy spent on the wording to make sure that we're really pinning down some of the, I'll say, root causes of the most recent failure. But again, a reminder that there have been some 300 failures since the early 1900s of dams, at least within the state of Michigan. So really trying to tackle that. And my last editorial, I guess, is as we get down to the second bullet from the bottom, that also is intended to include, there was a series of 20 dams that staff had identified for one of the working groups. And I believe there may be some tailings dams that fit into that, where we realized that the 5-acre impoundment in the current 315 didn't capture those 20 dams. And the idea is getting more of the volume behind this impoundment. You know, it's basically a tall dam with a small area of impoundment, but a high volume, which does present a risk downstream. So again, a variety of nuances here, and I guess I'll be quiet and let people take a chance to absorb and let us know if there's any concerns.
Well, I'll jump in again. 15
Sure.
acre feet is it's going to put a lot of small dams up in the UP onto the having to be permitted.
Well, that
opinion.
Yes, Stan, I think that ties into a question that I had, which is how are you defining that volume? Is it above standard river elevation or is it above flood stage elevation? I think that needs to be sussed out a little better. I didn't want to suggest any language here because I'm not really sure where this is coming from, but I think that just has to be better defined. Because yeah, it's like Stan said, if you define it with respect to standard river water surface elevation, that's a huge difference. That's a much lower bar than defining it with respect to floodwater surface elevation. However, the latter case may not capture anybody that you're trying to get. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I guess I would defer to staff briefly to just help with the problem statement here. My understanding again of that there's 20 dams in the system that I'll say fall through the cracks, but perhaps Eagle staff could, or the director could give us just a little bit better summary of what are we aiming for before there's further discussion on language.
Yes,
and I would add that Dan Devon from staff has raised his hand.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is Dan Devon. The impetus for making this change is because we have a number of dams around the state that do not, that are greater than 6 feet in height. Quite frankly, some of them, in the 20, 30, 40 feet in height, but don't have a 5-acre surface area impoundment under the flood stage condition. So these are pretty significant structures that could have significant impacts if they were to fail, but they are unregulated currently. So this would essentially alleviate that that gap in regulatory authority for structures that, quite frankly, have may have some significant impacts but are not regulated currently.
Dan, just a quick question then. I mean, you can have a 5-acre Lake Eliza up here in the UP, up in Eagle Harbor is 5 acres, 3 feet deep. That's it. That would fall under this.
No, not likely, because your storage is probably going to be less than that 15 acre feet. If you were to take a look at the bathymetry, it more than likely, because you're not, I mean, unless it's vertical walls, for 3 feet, you're probably not going to have that.
If the average depth was 3 feet, though.
if the average depth.
Yeah, that's 15 acre feet.
Yep.
Hey, Dan, this is, let me.
Oh, good. Thank you, Luke.
So the current statute reads 6 feet high and 5 acres of surface impoundment area during the design flood. What we have is what Dan said, is where we have some dams that are very tall and hold back a significant volume that are also, that don't meet the 5 acres during the design flood because the impoundment is kind of constrained within the riverbanks or flood walls or whatever the condition might be. So those are currently unregulated, and some of those are high and significant hazard potential dams. If you think about it, so if you have the situation with the Dan just, or sorry, that Stan just described, where it's 3 feet deep, then the dam probably isn't over 6 feet high. It would be my, unless there is a deeper part. But what I'm trying to say is, so if you look at the very minimum that is currently regulated, if it was 5 acres and exactly 6 feet, you know, one third of the volume times the height, you know, you get is like 5 acre feet, you know, something that is 5 acre feet now could be currently regulated if it's 5 acre. Well, I'm sorry, that's not quite right. 10 acre feet. So something that is 10 acre feet could currently be regulated as the very minimum if it was, you know, exactly 6 feet high dam, exactly 5 acres of impoundment size. That's 10 acre feet. So the volume would be 15, which would be something a little bit less restrictive, but it captures those situations in which we have a very tall dam, the very small impoundment that could still be a higher significant hazard dam. So I think it's kind of an addition. It's 15 acre feet. And if we look back at like the NID, the National Inventory of Dams, and several other states, most people use a volumetric measurement, not a surface area measurement when they're talking about impounding capacity. So that was kind of where it stemmed from. Not that it's not open for discussion, but that was kind of the thought process that went into, you know, developing that recommendation.
So to be clear, what we're really talking about is 6 feet in height and 15 acre feet or more is the way that language would fit in, is my understanding. And that's not clear in the wording here, but I can see where you can interpret it either way.
Yeah, I think that "and" is important there.
That's really
but I think also just some defining, Luke, what, you know, how you're defining that volume, because like you said, the existing statute just goes by area. So are you defining that volume as above standard river elevation of impounded water or above flood river elevation?
It's impounded by the dam at design flood elevation. So it'd be the water level above the river. So whatever it's being held back by the dam, the total storage that would get released if the dam were to fail.
So if you've got a 5.5 foot structure, or if you have a 6 foot structure and you're only your delta H across the dam is only 2.5 feet with 5 acres, then you're not getting the 15 acre feet anymore. So you're not counting just that water that's above standard river at that point.
Yeah, storage volume. Yeah, that's a little more intricate than I think we intended here. But yeah, if the tailwater comes up during a flood, you know, what's being impounded by the dam and what would be the level is kind of, you know, it is just that above the, you know, the river level. But typically when we talk about it, we talk about the criteria, but also we're looking at the sunny day failure as well. So, you know, what normal elevation and normal storage would be, and then that maximum storage is. But you're right, you would define maximum storage as what's ever being impounded during, you know, that design flood that gives you the maximum storage. But yeah, I think it's okay. It takes some teasing, but that was the intent anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the impoundment word actually is not defined in the statute, and what that really means, I think, probably needs to be sussed out better here. You know, whether it's just water that happens to be behind the dam, but isn't necessarily representing a change in head, which represents your time duration of the flood now, instead of necessarily elevating your tailwater. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
Duly noted. Paul, are you somewhat comfortable that Eagle staff will be able to parse that out based on our direction on as far as your point? Or is that something where we need to set this recommendation aside? I don't think we're in a position to make up language to cover that.
No, and I think I am, you know, and as long as as long as the 6-foot rule stays in place with this, then I'm good either way, I guess. I don't know. What do you think, Stan?
Well, yeah, I mean, just throw this out, and my lack of knowledge in some of this areas, but I mean, a beaver dam can impound this easily. I mean,
you know, just to
go ahead.
Sorry. Just wanted to check in if there is specific language to propose or if this is workable as is. Just wanted to go back to our process of if there are objections to please provide some new language that can be acted on today, or will this need to be a set aside?
This is Douglas Chester. In order to help move this forward, I think there is consensus that we're still talking about dams 6 feet high. So I would propose that we add that for clarity and take that issue off the table and do so by inserting after the also include dams phrase that are 6 feet or higher, and that, and right, and then continue with what's there.
Yeah.
With that,
I had the same suggestion. I know that doesn't quite delve into the other issue, but I'm not sure that we solve it here, and I'm not sure that we're in the best position to solve it. I would also like to note too that with all of these recommendations, there is a recognition that there are a lot of unregulated dams out there. And if I understand correctly, one of the things that most of the task force is aiming for is to have less unregulated dams out there. So I certainly appreciate what Stan is saying. We don't want to regulate where there isn't you know, any notable risk, but the volume of 15 acre feet suddenly moving downstream, I think, is the threshold we're trying to establish here. And I trust that this gives enough guidance or direction to staff to ultimately get that into, you know, there will be, let's put it this way, this is a recommendation that we have that's going to require legislative language. So we're not passing a law here. And if there is a need for parsing things out or a feeling that it's overreach, there will certainly be an opportunity if this gets to the legislative process to really fine tune things as well. Just something to think about with this.
I concur with the line as amended by Douglas Chester. I'm good with it.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too. I just didn't want it to be standalone 15 acre.
Yeah. Yep. And to be fair, I think we got some warning that folks were going to want to spend a minute or two on this. We spent more than a minute or two, but that's okay. So let's zoom back out. I'm hearing that we don't have additional concerns on this particular bullet, the fifth one down. So I'll just pause for a minute and make sure that's true.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, so are you speaking to the MOU bullet?
No, I was just talking about the one we've been discussing, the 6 feet or higher or what have you, before I double checked on how are we feeling about the overall.
Thank you.
Okay, with that though, let's get back to, we've got a grouping of recommendations and it sounds like Brett would like to talk about the MOU briefly. Go for it.
Thank you, Evan. And I know you spent some time working on this. I acknowledge that. And this is, I guess, more of a point of clarification or for my better understanding. So, because I don't know which of these if thens are more likely to be successful. I'm in favor, certainly, of development of a MOU that would allow dam safety program access to the information necessary. But if that can't be developed, I'm not certain what the likelihood of changing the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Act. That seems like a high bar. And lastly, then if both of those are unsuccessful, then Michigan law would be amended. So my first glance at this was thinking, why would we not start with the Michigan law and then include in that something to the effect that it be amended to require any information provided to the government or federal government under FERC license be provided to DSP via provisions defined in an MOU that does protect the integrity of that sensitive information.
Yeah. You know, Brett, from my personal sense, that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. I feel like based on the discussion we had on the last one and the gravity of this particular comment, I'm not sure we can get through it here today. So I think what I'd like to do is just see if there are a couple of other people that have a similar concern or something like that. But this might be one that we set aside and ask a small team to work on and polish up between now and Friday. I just don't want to cut off the comment right now, but I just want to let people know I think I will put the brakes on discussion after 2 or 3 minutes. I'd like to just see if anybody else concurs with what Brett has brought up or has a different concern on this particular item. Just open it up to the floor. And I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the hands, so I could use a hand from Elizabeth or Aaron if we need to call on people.
Well, I'll speak up at this point. So as a FERC licensee, I prefer the way it's written because the MOU allows you to target that sensitive information that was associated with events that happened last year in Michigan, in my opinion. For a FERC licensee to provide all information provided to the federal government, to the state, that is a tremendous amount of information and a tremendous additional burden on FERC licensees. And so it goes down the path, although not all the way there, of dual regulation. And I know my staff in particular has been very vocal with me about making sure we don't submit ourselves to dual regulation where it not be appropriate. So that's kind of a counter, Brett, to leading with the Michigan law that kind of heads us down the path of dual regulation.
I would, this Bill Rustin, I'd agree with John. I think if you look at the likelihood of getting there, I think the most likely is an MOU, the development of an MOU with FERC. I mean, if we have this debate in the Michigan legislature, it probably is not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's my view. Bill Rustin.
See, Abby has her hand up physically.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that the MOU is definitely, like John said, the right path. My concern also, though, echoes with Brett, is kind of the second part of that. If the MOU cannot be developed, that CISA law for Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Act, that is a federal law. That is going to be exceptionally hard to tackle, and I'm not sure that's the right path first. I think the right path first would be to try and do something with Michigan law, before we try and make a recommendation to modify a federal law, because that's going to have a lot of cascading effects for a lot of different infrastructure.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, it sounds like we've got a couple of different viewpoints. I don't know if there's 9 more. But what I really was hearing was I think I heard at least 3 or maybe 4 volunteers to try to crush through this by the end of the week. So when we would like to try to finalize, of course, the recommendation. But I think one last pass, besides the points that have been mentioned about which should come first or second, did anybody have any other? Yeah.
Yeah, Dan Scripps has his hand raised.
Oh, I apologize. Yep. So I'll take one more comment on this, though. I think we're setting it aside anyway. So Dan, go ahead. And if anybody else would like to be part of fine tuning this, you can go ahead and raise your hand as well. Go ahead.
I basically, I think, agree with a lot of what's been said, but I I do think, I mean, this was core to why we convened, and it was core to the failures in Midland. And I don't know what the solution is, but we have to get here. And so John, I appreciate, I don't think anybody's interested in dual regulation. But I think we need to make sure that when FERC abdicates, as it did in the Midland situation, that we have the information at the state level. And so whether that's an MOU or whether it's that that we're going to belt and suspenders, that the information's already being provided. And so and maybe it's only sort of when you're in that warning time, so it's not every dam, but I don't think we can sort of set this aside because of those sorts of concerns. I think we need to make sure that when FERC steps aside, that the state folks have the information they need to protect the public.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess I'm happy to join the team of folks trying to work through this. I do think we need to find, and I don't know what it is, but we need to find a way to get to that objective.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to ask that PSC do a follow-up with the folks who have commented. So if anybody else did not have an opportunity to chime in and would like to be a part of of tweaking this, certainly it's got good stuff in there. We're concerned about the sequencing, and we'll try to get something calendared hopefully later this week, and we will advise people as to how will we get this in front of the full group to make sure that it's ratified. That may come as part of the final report, but again, we'll let people know how exactly we're going to give everyone a final pass at the final language. Okay. So with that, we're pulling this particular item, the third bullet that's in front of everyone's screens right now. Going back to the overall grouping, are there any other concerns with either the first three or the last one, which we have not discussed as yet? Going once? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next grouping. Thanks a bunch for the input. As Elizabeth mentioned, we did anticipate a need to talk a little bit on some of these that have had a lot of work done on them. So we're still within that budget group, a budget program, and so forth. So as far as financing goes, there are some recommendations about removals and funding and so forth. So just a couple of bullets here that have evolved since November. Give everybody a minute to look at those and identify if there are any concerns or objections. Going once. Okay, we'll move forward from this one and move to the next group. All right, in the next group, we've got 5 recommendations here. I will point out that there was some discussion within this budget and program group about recommending a specific dollar amount for the Dam Safety Emergency Fund. And the group felt a little challenged to do that. In our discussions with Eagle, I don't want to over-represent the group, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the group felt like it would be best to give Eagle some flexibility to dig a little deeper into what's the historic need been, what other information do they have. Again, this is when you talk about a Dam Safety Emergency Fund, you're certainly talking about legislative action, so there is going to be further work on this. I just want to mention that, why there's no dollar amount here, but the revolving loan funds did have a dollar amount to them. So with that, open these up for anyone who has a concern about any specific item.
Aaron and Chairman, am I seeing that the first bullet point is tabled right now?
It had been oh, sorry. Go ahead, Erin.
Sorry, Elizabeth. Yeah, no, you're correct, Glenn. These were the ones that were previously tabled. So I'm just noting, like you saw, I deleted the last one that was tabled since everyone's approved it now. So it was like no longer, but yes, this was previously tabled. So if there's no further discussion on it and everyone is good with it, I will delete the note that says it was tabled.
Yeah. I'm sorry, we did have a few items that were tabled that people, it sounded like people just needed a little more time to chew on, and no real specific recommendations came in. The ones we just discussed, there was a lot of input. This particular one, there was really no feedback or no request to change previously. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I hesitate to even comment on this bullet point because I wasn't privy to any of the background discussion on it. I guess nevertheless, though, I remain uncomfortable with some of the language there. And I think I mentioned before that I'm uncomfortable because I'm fearful that it creates some unintended liability for the state. And Douglas and I never had the opportunity to further discuss this more. So again, I feel like at a disadvantage. But my fears would be is like, could the state become liable for correcting all deficiencies, or could the state become liable for any imminent hazard? And maybe I'm reading it incorrectly, but I guess my comfort level or lack of it stems from those questions and concerns.
Yeah.
And Dan Devon from staff is asking to contribute here.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yes, so I mean, we've actually had this discussion internally a little bit as well, that, you know, just the way the statute's currently written in regards to emergency situations, you know, it states basically that the state may step in and take action. You know, I guess the inherent question there is, do we already have some responsibility to take on these issues, even though we don't have the funding to do it? So this really is more so stepping in and saying, hey, now we actually have the funding to do something.
Yeah.
This is Lisa, if I can chime in, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
The other thing I would say is I think these are really important points that would need to be explored before a legislative step. So I think it's okay for the intent of the task force to say, you know, we think this is an important direction. And Glenn, I appreciate what you're raising. I would say that, you know, we would need to obviously do a variety of things before we got to the point of actually recommending statute. And I think that it should be considered for sure in the course of that work. So if the task force felt like they wanted to recommend it, you know, we can still, obviously we're still going to take the other steps before it goes through the legislative process.
Yeah, I also believe that when this was discussed in the working group, kind of that same theme came up. So number one, this certainly requires legislative action. And as the director said, there's more contemplation in there, but also to my earlier point about possibly having some restructuring of the sequence of these recommendations. There's another recommendation somewhere in here that I can't recall if we have already given a thumbs up or if we'll see again today. The anticipation is killing me, but there's one that talks about providing liability insurance in so many words between the dam owner basically indemnifying Eagle, but it doesn't get specific about exactly what type of insurance are we looking for, or liability protection are we looking for the exact same reason here. That really needs to be parsed out as to perhaps even on individual dams of certain characteristics, there's a need for a different type of liability, you know, protection for the Eagle staff. And I think those two go hand in hand. And I would presume that legislatively, those two requirements would likely come packaged in bills that were at least reviewed at the same time, if not separately. I don't want to get out in front of the director, but at the end of the day, I think what we're all saying is there's going to have to be legislative language drafted on this, and it's going to have to deal with every single little nuance and survive committee and legislative grilling. So I felt comfortable with its vagueness at this point, personally.
Excuse me, Chair, do we have time for one? I think we have time for about one more comment on this. Brian Burrows had his hand up.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. I would just, I'm not objecting to any comments going forward. I just wanted to highlight that on this particular one, when we were in committee, we did, this was an example of one that we wrote a couple of pages of greater detail and thought on this one specifically. And I know that that's, you know, it went out a couple months ago, but it had, you know, the language here is very much working off the ASDSO wording of the recommendations, but in committee, we really put together quite a bit more thought about how this would be implemented. And I would just answer also that and echo Dan's interpretation is that the responsibility and liability, the way we intended this is no different. This is just seeking to provide a means for action when it's deemed necessary and appropriate, which is in our committee, we've kind of found to be the biggest problem is that there isn't a means, a ready at hand means to take action when it's deemed appropriate right now. You basically have to go back up within an entire department and try to find the financial resources and take those from somewhere else, frankly, in order to take that action. So that was our intent here, was just to provide the financial means to take action, not to really sort of modify any responsibility or liability. But there, as we progress to a full report, we should probably keep in mind some of those possible appendices, because we did put together some more detailed thinking about this one.
Thank you, Brian. That's a much better treatment than I gave of the work group's efforts. So I'm going to paraphrase. It sounds like we don't have a strong objection to the concept. There's concern about the depth of the language. My suggestion in this case would be to move on, but to ask that PSC include a little bit of narrative that relies on the expanded version that Brian and others in the work group worked out. And I am seeing a note that there is a request to strike the word any imminent hazard.
Sorry, Evan, as in just any, or the whole phrase any imminent hazard?
Just any, just the word any. So we would need to change hazard to include an S. And just personally, I don't feel that changes the intent or what we said about there's a lot to be worked out in legislative language. So I feel comfortable with that. I'd like to just give the task force one last chance to comment on either this one or anything else in the emergency funding area. I totally agree, this is really important. Going once? All right, thanks for the discussion and the recommendations to tweak that a little. We will move on to our next grouping. Good discussion. Okay, I know we had some discussion in the past on this at our December meeting. So we've got items that we've seen before. There was a desire for changes. People did provide some language to hopefully address what was discussed previously. At the end of the day, I just want to comment real quick before opening up. The word license is used here. Some states still do a permit or a renewable permit. As we know, or many people probably know, whether it's a drinking water system or a sewage treatment plant, they're issued a permit for construction. And then there's also an operating permit that really functions like a license. So just to not get hung up on the word license, it could be called an operating permit. It could be called a license. But again, the idea is, as we discussed last time, there's two things that you can't do with a construction permit that's issued, approved, and closed. You can't continue to maintain that financial security to ensure that the dams are being taken care of responsibly, or more to the point, that there's a mechanism that does not cost the public when a dam is not taken care of responsibly, and also allows for so I'm drawing a blank here, so I'll just be quiet and see if there's any further comments from the committee. Any concerns with these three items? Going once? All right, thank you. I guess I bored everybody to tears, and we'll move on to the next group.
Or it means everyone did their homework.
Okay, so we're on to another work group, one I am less familiar with. So if there are questions and a work group member feels a need to clarify, like Brian did, feel free to keep raising your hands and I'll try to listen to Elizabeth. But we'll take on 2020 14A through 14G at this time. Is that right? These are all ones we have not given a thumbs up to yet.
That's correct.
Going once, any other comments or concerns? Okay, I'll take a page from Elizabeth and thank everyone for doing their homework, and we'll move to the next grouping. So an emergency response, we've got a 2020 15A through, we're going to be able to fit 15E in there, as well as a couple of tabled items that were newer to December. So there's a lot here. As you can see, there was a fair amount of back and forth. I was not included in all of it, but I know the officers did do a sweep over the weekend just to make sure that we had gotten synthesized all the information that people presented or all the suggestions and reconciled any, I'll say, fine tuning or differences of opinion. So any concerns on this group of items? Going once.
Going to stand it on you, just quick.
Yep.
In the first part, again, this is my lack of ever working on these type of things, but in that first paragraph going towards the end, it says when a dam owner lacks the resources to act. I mean, we're also requiring that they have the resources to act. So is that redundant?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I don't know if someone that was part of the work group wants to chime in as far as the wording or what the feeling was, or from Eagle. I'll take.
Well, I'll take a first crack at it. I think we have an intent that in advance we have owners that have the financial resources. We know that's going to be problematic in some cases, depending on how long it takes to get through that process. So what we're really saying here is, in terms of emergency response, we don't want the lack of an owner being in the queue to demonstrate that they have financial resources to preclude us from responding to emergencies. So we may still run into situations, even if with the requirement that you demonstrate you have financial resources, that people are either unable or unwilling to respond in an emergency. And in that case, we want the emergency response plan to cover those situations as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like automobile insurance. You're required by law to have automobile insurance. There are certain people that don't have it, and so somebody's got to pick up the cost of that. And that's I think what this is trying to say.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. That's fine.
Yeah, good point. And any other comments about any of these items, or concerns, I should say? Going once, or going twice, I guess? All right, I think we'll move on to the next grouping then. Thank you again. Thanks, Dan, for that clarification too.
Just waiting for Aaron to remove those tables. So that is the last page in the document. So I think by suggesting we might have to go to 12:30 was a good incentive.
I didn't realize that. So at this point, I would like to check and see with PSC if we did have any requests for public comment, given the amount of time we have left here. I have not seen anything in the chat box, so.
I have not seen anything. Aaron, you?
Okay. So one last time for anyone who has tuned in here today, there will be a dedicated public meeting for the recommendations of the Dam Safety Task Force coming up on January 27th. And please remind me, is that a 9 a.m. or a meeting, Elizabeth?
Yeah, 9 a.m. And I know Eagle staff is working on getting that information put up on the task force website. And that'll be a Zoom meeting. So right now it's scheduled from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. on January 27th.
And I'll just point out for the task force members, we coordinated the timing of that around when the chair, vice chair, and secretary would be available, as well as the director and other key Eagle staff, knowing that there may be an item or two in the public comment that's important for them to absorb. This was not made as a mandatory for task force members. We know everyone may not be able to attend if it wasn't already on their calendar, but it's great if you're willing and able to listen along to folks. Again, we should get a summary synopsis of at least the key themes and any concerns that folks have raised with the recommendations coming into our meeting of February 3rd. Our goal will be to wrap up the report on February 3rd. So I do strongly suggest to folks to block out some time on your calendar for reviewing a full report. We will not be able to go through all the detailed language of a report. And there will be more information coming out from either me or PSC about the remaining steps in the process that lead up to getting a draft report in task force members' hands and the amount of turnaround time you'll have. I think that will be very important for us to be clear on where we've got to block out some time in our own schedules to really go through that report to make sure that we've read it and we have a comfort level with all of what the report says. Of course, these bullets and these recommendations are the primary substance of the report, but I know it's something that is intended to be used for quite some time, and I'm sure everyone's going to want to make sure if they're giving their thumbs up that we're doing our best work. So just a plug on that side of things. I'd like to just double check and see if the director has any other comments about the wrap up as we move along here.
So thanks, Evan, and thanks to everybody for the participation in the discussion today. The only thing that I would add is, as Evan said, there will be additional communication about how the next few steps work together. It's our intent to have something public so that when we have the meeting, the public comment session, January 27th, the public is informed so that they have something to respond to. Obviously, a lot of people have participated over the course of these meetings. They are recorded and there's materials for everybody to look at, but we are trying to make it as easy and transparent as possible to receive that public input. So, and come up, we obviously are happy to receive public input in any way folks want to give it. So if it's, speaking on the 27th, or if there's another way, if it's written or something like that, would be glad to receive that as well. I feel like I had one more thought on public comments, but it's not coming to me now. So we just do really appreciate people participating because it makes it a more robust and complete exercise. But I just can't say enough thank yous to the members of the task force for this deliberation. And the meetings, the task force meetings themselves only are the tip of the iceberg in terms of the types of time and commitment you all are putting into this. So your expertise is really to make this a robust, meaningful process. So I just want to say again how much I appreciate the time.
Yeah, I certainly echo that, and I know the officers appreciate it a great amount. I do see one item on public input in the chat from an attendee asking if the written comments will be included in the minutes. And I think my understanding is that it is typical for a public input, a formal, public input process like this from Eagle to capture all of the comments, and they would be available more like an appendix to the report as opposed to specifically in the minutes, but perhaps you all can correct me a little bit of what are we going to do with the comments when we get them? What is your intent, Director?
Well, I will say, first of all, it depends on the comments, right? And so if we get a bunch of, yeah, great jobs, that's wonderful. But I anticipate because of the engagement from the public that we'll get some important things that we need to talk through. So I think you can expect a summary. I don't know that it would be verbatim. I remember the other thing I wanted to mention. For the task force members who are not able to participate on the 27th, which we totally understand, as Evan described, there are also recordings. So a variety of ways for the task force members to be able to receive the information that we get from the public if they're not able to participate on the 27th. So just wanted to mention that one too.
Great. And for folks who are not following the chat, of course, we've had these recommendations that we've reviewed here and in December. I understand that it's a little challenging for folks to parse through all of those or look at recordings, but the recommendations will be posted prior to the public meeting of the 27th, so people have time to digest them. And I think that's part of the guidance, to keep an eye on the Dam Safety Task Force website, because the steps and dates will get laid out a little bit more fully as we get into next week, is my understanding. Any other comments from the Vice Chair or the Secretary? Anything that I've missed that we needed to make sure and cover for everyone before we break? John?
No, I again thank everyone for their hard work in preparing for today. It went much more smoothly than maybe some of us had anticipated, which is awesome, and certainly is a testament to the pre-work that all of you did. So thank you.
Yeah. And Doug, any other wrap up from your end?
No, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the way this came together.
Okay, final comments or instructions from PSC. This will be the last item on our agenda.
I would just like to reiterate what's already been said. Thank you so much for all of the hard work and dedication that you all have contributed to this process, and especially want to recognize the officers who spent their weekend combing through the recommendations, and I think that helped us also be ready for today. Just to reiterate some of what was said, we are going to be helping to get that public comment meeting off to a good start and attending that. So there will be updated information shared with you so that if you can attend, you'll have that information. And then we are also getting immersed in drafting the final report to the extent that we can while public comments are coming in. And there's just a couple of issues that came up today as you review the recommendations that we'll need to see if we can resolve. But that is really what we'll be working on at PSC, is drafting that final report. Great. So it's a quick turnaround between now and the public meeting and the February 3rd meeting of the task force.
Great. Well, in anticipation of the extra work we have to get to the finish line, I guess we are all granting ourselves 45 minutes of found time today. I thank again the task force for their hard work, as well as the folks who have volunteered to just get us over the finish line with those last two items. And I'll call our meeting adjourned for today. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, members of the public. Have a great week.